Hello everyone, in today's video I bring you an impressive story. Ethan Peterson, a 13-year-old boy, died after being struck by lightning and returned with an urgent message about the end times. What he saw on the other side was chilling. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, activate the bell and comment from which city you are watching. Now get ready. This story could change everything. I remember the smell of the rain before everything went out. My name is Ethan Peterson. I have 13 years and I died. It's not easy to say that. It still sounds strange even to me. But I'm not here to convince you of anything. I just need to tell you what I saw, because they sent me back to warn you. The last thing I remember before leaving my body was the light of the lightning. White, absurd, cutting through the sky, and then the ground coming quickly towards me. I didn't feel pain. None. It was as if, the moment the thunder broke, I had detached myself. Suddenly I was on my feet, but my body was still on the floor. I saw everything. My mother screaming, people running, sirens coming. But the sound seemed far away, as if someone had put pillows in my ears. That's where it started. The air became heavy, dense. Everything around me stopped, not in the slow motion sense. It really stopped. The rain froze in the air, like tiny jewels floating, and in the midst of that absurd silence, I felt a presence. I didn't see it right away. First, I felt it. It was like a heat coming from within the air itself. A heat that didn't burn, but that made my heart remember that it existed, even without beating. I turned around, and there he was. A figure of light, so intense that my eyes should have closed. But there was no pain in the eyes. He didn't speak with his mouth. He spoke inside me. You shouldn't have come yet. The voice was calm but firm, as if each word carried centuries of love and sadness. I wanted to stay. My body back there seemed so small, so irrelevant. Here I felt everything. It was as if for the first time I was whole. No fear. Shameless. Undoubtedly. He extended his hand. When he did this, the ground beneath my feet, if it was ground at all, opened up like a curtain of stars. I saw worlds, cities shining, lines of gold crossing the darkness. I saw people praying, crying, giving up, and lights going out one by one. Look, he said. And then I saw the gate. Gigantic. Alive. Vibrating with a golden light so strong my chest felt like it was going to explode. But what froze me was not the beauty. This is what I saw around him. Cracks, cracks. The gate was closing, slowly, inevitably. I turned to him, desperate, and asked, without words, "What does that mean?" He looked at me, with eyes that knew my every thought before I even thought it, and replied, "The time of mercy is at an end. Go, tell them. It is not too late, but it will be very soon." Before I could ask further, he touched my chest, and it was like being thrown back by an invisible hurricane. The world of sound, pain, fear, it all came back at once. I woke up screaming, clutching my chest with the feeling that if I didn't speak, something much worse was coming. When I returned to my body, it wasn't like waking up from a dream. It was like falling from an abyss straight into the flesh. I felt the air ripping through my lungs. I heard voices, my mother crying, someone shouting my name, but I still couldn't move my body properly. It was like I was half here and half there. Because even with my eyes open, I still saw the other side. It was like looking at two worlds at the same time. The sodden field, the sky cracked with lightning, and behind it all, a second heaven, bigger, more real, made of music, light, and movement. It was as if the reality that everyone knows was just a dirty reflection of what really exists. I tried to speak, but the first thing that came out of my mouth was a whisper. "He's coming." Nobody understood. But I saw it. Behind the golden curtain of the gate, a force was moving. It wasn't Jesus. They weren't angels. It was something darker. Something that was waiting for the last crack to close before releasing itself on us. As the paramedics tried to stabilize me, my vision blurred and I was pulled out again. Only this time, not to the same shiny place. I was taken to what he called the world between two breaths. I don't know how to explain it. It was a space. No floor, no ceiling, no time. A place where the very air vibrated with the choice you made. Move forward or be lost forever. The colors there weren't normal colors. They were vivid, pulsating, as if each color had a sound. I could hear the blue, feel the orange touching, my skin like warm wind. In the middle of that place there were voices, thousands. Some were crying, others laughed, others screamed in fear. I saw children, teenagers, adults. Some were shining. Others were going out like dying embers. "These are the ones who are still deciding," he explained to me. "Between life and death?" I asked inside myself. "No," he replied. "Between truth and illusion." It was there that I understood. Real death is not the end of breathing. It's the end of know where you go when it stops. I saw young people, and many, standing still, looking at two invisible paths. One glowed with a warm light, which called but demanded courage. The other was easy, colorful, comfortable, but empty, with no return. Each choice seemed to echo in the very fabric of the place. And then, he showed me something that still makes me tremble. Some gates were already closed. People arrived before them too late, crying, knocking, begging. But the light inside had already gone out. It wasn't punishment. It was a consequence. "Come back, Ethan," he said. "Go back and tell them. The door is still open, but not for long." I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet again, and I woke up with my eyes burning with tears that I didn't even know I had shed. I thought I had seen everything. I thought the worst part was watching the gate closing, seeing the choices lost. But I had no idea what came next. While my soul was still wandering between here and hereafter, he took me to another place. Not walking, not flying. All it took was an internal blink, and I was already there. It was like being in an endless valley, where the sky was gray, heavy, as if it had swallowed all the colors. In front of me, there were rows and rows of figures, with their backs to me, motionless. There were thousands, maybe millions. Each one of them seemed to be made of dust, as if any wind could blow them away. I stood still, trying to understand what I was seeing. The feeling was suffocating, sad. These people, these beings, seemed frozen in time. Asked inside myself, who are they? And without him needing to respond in words, understanding entered my chest like a ray of memory. They were the ones who remained silent. The souls who, one day, had felt the call. They had heard the voice of God. They had been touched by the truth. But at the decisive moment, they were silent. Out of fear, out of shame, by distraction. And now, there they were, paralyzed between worlds, their voices swallowed by their own choice. Each one had a kind of flame on top of their head, small and trembling. Some were still smoking, others had already gone out completely. My heart ached looking at them. It was like feeling the weight of a lost opportunity in your flesh. I stepped forward, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to. As I did so, a wind began to blow between the rows, and then finally they turned around. Their faces, they weren't ugly, not even monstrous. They were empty, eyes without light, mouths half open as if they had died, in the middle of a scream that never came out. I shook all over. That's when he spoke to me again, not harshly but sadly. Hell begins in the silence of those who should have spoken. Those words entered me like fire. The fear of making mistakes, the fear of being rejected, the fear of being ridiculed. All of this, he showed me, is used to silence those who carry the truth, and every unspoken truth, every abandoned prayer, every gesture of love swallowed by fear generates places like this, a valley of soundless echoes. I started crying without being able to control it. It was unfair. It was horrible. But it was real. So what do I do? I asked, desperate. He put his hand on my shoulder, and in that touch I understood. Speak, even when your voice shakes. Even when the world laughs, speak, because your scream can be someone's bridge to the light. I shook my head, sobbing. It was at that moment that the vision changed again. The ground opened beneath me like a rip, and I fell. I fell straight into the next scenario that would change everything inside me. When I fell from that valley, I didn't hit the ground. I just walked through, as if the whole world was made of veils and I was tearing each layer with my own chest. Suddenly, I was standing again, in a space that felt alive. Not a place made of floor or walls, but of breath, of presence. The very air, there seemed made of consciousness. In front of me, suspended in the void, floated a map. It wasn't an ordinary map, the kind you hang on the wall. It was a map made of light and sound. Golden lines intertwined to form continents, cities, roads. But in the midst of these vibrant lights, there were dark, vivid spots, as if they were open wounds. I took a step forward. Each shining point was a prayer. Every dark spot was an absence. I felt it in my spirit without needing to ask. It was as if the map spoke directly to me. Suddenly, he appeared next to me. I didn't need to look to know. His light made everything around it bow without force, just out of respect. He stretched out his hand and the map approached as if it were made of obedient smoke. "Look carefully," he said inside me. And then I saw it. The black spots were growing, not like violent explosions but like silent leaks, spreading through places where people had stopped watching, stopped praying, stopped listening. These places, he said, were not conquered, they were abandoned. My chest tightened. It was as if I could hear the groans of cities being covered in spiritual oblivion, families breaking up, churches getting cold, young people giving up, all because the light was left aside little by little. But all is not lost, he said. And that's when I saw, amidst the darkness, small sparks appeared, tiny, fragile, but so intense that even alone they pushed the darkness away. I saw children on their knees on the floor in messy rooms. I saw teenagers holding torn Bibles and praying in silence. I saw elderly people with their eyes closed, murmuring words that seemed to stitch together time itself. These were the keepers of the flame. "You are one of them," he told me. My entire body shook, not out of fear, but because of the overwhelming awareness of responsibility. He pointed to a line on the map, a line that started at a tiny dot in the middle of nowhere and spread like wildfire. "If you speak," he said, "the fire will spread. If you are silent, another will have to be raised, but the time is short." The last thing I saw on that map was a large black circle moving, slowly but inevitably, like a shadow about to cover everything. And in the middle of it, some points shone like small suns. I understood. What comes will not extinguish those who carry the light, but for those who live in the shadows, it will be like falling into a bottomless hole. When I turned to ask more, he was already calling me to the next place, the place where I would see. What happens when the last door closes? I felt his call before I even moved. It was as if the ground, the air, the light itself knew that what I was going to see now, there was no going back. I followed his presence without needing steps. In the world where I was, wanting was already walking. The scenario has changed. The map of light and shadows disappeared, and before me appeared a huge hallway, infinite, full of doors. Each door seemed to be made of liquid crystal, vibrating with colors I didn't recognize, changing according to something I felt more than I saw. I walked among them. Each door pulsed a different song. Some songs were beautiful, others hurt your bones. These, he explained, are the choices, the opportunities, the callings. I understood. Every human life has doors that open before it, moments where God calls, moments that define everything. But then I realized something terrible. Some doors were locked, not closed. Locked. When I approached one of them, I saw something even more frightening. On the floor, right in front of the lock, were voices, small sparks extinguished. And a voice echoed inside me. That door closed because no one answered. My stomach turned. I started running, desperate, looking at each door, trying to see which ones were still open. Every beat of my spirit seemed to say, "There's still time. There's still time." But then, at the front of the corridor, I saw a gigantic door, much bigger than all the others. She was half closed, and there was something on the other side of it, something banging, something impatient. "This is the door of mercy," he said with a sadness that cut like a knife. "It's closing, and when it closes, whatever's behind it will be released." My eyes filled with tears. I tried to run to her. I tried to stop her, but my arms passed through the scene as if I were made of smoke. "You can't stop her, Ethan," he said, "but you can warn them." I looked through the crack in the door, and what I saw, I didn't want to see it. Behind the door of mercy, there was something alive, writhing in the darkness. It was not a creature. It was a wave of deception, of fear, of fury against everything that is true. She was already stirring, eager to break through. I heard voices screaming inside, people being dragged without realizing it. And what's worse, many of them, smiling as they were taken away, as if they were entering a party. "When that door closes," he told me, "it will be much harder to hear my whisper amidst the scream of the world." My legs gave way. I fell to my knees on the floor of that hallway. "So what do I do?" I asked, sobbing. He knelt beside me, enveloping me in the sweetest, most devastating light I'd ever felt. "Speak, Ethan. Scream if you need to, but don't be silent. Every soul that wakes up now can stop others from being lost in what is to come." At that moment, a flame lit in my chest. Not a normal flame. It was as if my very existence had caught. Fire, consuming fear, doubt, silence. It was then that he said something I will never forget. "The time for decision is not tomorrow. It is now." And when he spoke, the last slam of the door echoed like thunder in my bones. The time was coming. And I knew, if I didn't speak, I would also be responsible. After I heard the bang of that last door, I thought everything was going to end there. But he didn't let it. Instead, he extended his hand again. When it touched my forehead, a new scenario exploded before me, so quickly that for a second I lost track of where I ended and the world began. Now I was in an open, infinite field. But it wasn't grass or dirt. It was a ground made of pure pulsating light, breathing as if the ground itself were alive. All around, scattered like seeds about to germinate, were people kneeling. Thousands. All with their eyes closed, with their hands on their chests, and each one carried a flame within itself, small, discreet, but impossible to put out. They didn't look strong. They didn't seem ready. But they were chosen. "These," he said, "are the ones the world forgot, the ones religion ignored, the ones hell itself feared." His every word seemed to set my spirit on fire. I walked among them. I saw children so young that they should still be playing with dolls. I saw teenagers with invisible wounds on their chests, like scars from battles no one had ever seen. I saw elderly people who the world called useless, but who here shone like silent torches. And then I saw something that took my breath away. Every time one of these people whispered a prayer, even the weakest, the most timid, the entire sky responded with a thunder of light. The sky I heard every whisper as if it were a war cry. I stopped in front of a girl. She looked to be about 9 years old, Franzina, with eyes closed. But when she opened her mouth and murmured just one word, "Come," the ground shook beneath my feet. "These are the hidden ones," he explained to me, "trained in silence, refined in rejection, prepared in pain. They were not crowd leaders, they weren't famous, but they were so full of light that when the time came, would become like living fires in a sleeping world. When the darkness seems to win," he said, "it will be these who set the earth on fire." My eyes watered. I understood that this army did not carry ordinary weapons. They carried the raw truth. Love without makeup. The faith that does not negotiate. They would not be recognized by their titles, their clothes, or the followers they had on social media. They would be recognized by the fire in the eyes and for the wounds in the heart. And then he looked at me, not demandingly, but urgently. "You are one of them too, Ethan, and so are many who will hear your tale, even if they don't know it yet." The entire floor began to vibrate like a war drum. It was the call, the final call. And there, in the midst of that silent army, I understood. It wasn't about age, appearance, or position. It was about disposition. It was about listening and responding. He gave me one last look filled with something I can only call hope, and it pulled me back to what would be the most terrifying and most necessary revelation. He pulled me forward with a force that wasn't brutal but inevitable, as if after everything I've seen, this next vision was the most urgent. Suddenly, the light field disappeared. Now I was in a place that looked beautiful. Too much. Bright, golden, full of soft music in the air. Crowds gathered, hands raised, faces smiling. For a moment, my heart wanted to believe it was heaven, but then I felt it. Deep in my chest. A cold pang. An empty echo. The glow was beautiful, but it was hollow. I looked around. I saw huge stages, people preaching with strong voices, hands being laid on heads, people crying, screaming, dancing. And still the air smelled of something dead. "This," he said in a heavy voice, "is the false revival." I trembled. It was not a vision of a distant future. It was something already beginning, already growing, already being celebrated. But how? I asked in thought, confused, with my heart in pieces. Aren't they speaking your name? Aren't they singing about you? His answer came like thunder inside my spirit. They speak my name, but they do not hear my voice. They sing my praises, but they do not recognize me when I enter. They have created a light that does not come from my presence. Every word tore me up inside. I looked again and saw preachers proclaiming freedom, but chaining hearts to pride. Churches full, but without the weight of regret. False miracles, feeding vanity, not transformation. People danced in golden circles, smiling as a shadow rose beneath them. A shadow they didn't see, because they were blinded by the artificial light they created. This is the revival that feeds the ego, not the spirit, he told me. It's made for men, not for the kingdom. I saw young people being drawn like moths to these lights, attracted by music, sensation, movement. But as they approached, the light consumed them from the inside out. It was a fire that seemed to warm but only burned real faith. And then he showed me something even worse. Many of the leaders of this movement started well. They started with true passion, with real tears. But at some point, they sold out. For fame, for power, for acceptance. They were not deceived from the outside in, he said. They were corrupted from the inside out. The silence after those words was so heavy that it seemed like he was holding his breath for eternity. I fell to my knees crying. "So, no one will notice?" I asked. He knelt before me, his eyes filled with a love that hurt so pure, and replied, "Some will understand. Those who have learned to hear my whisper in the midst of the noise. They will recognize the difference between my presence and a performance." It was for these few, the hidden ones, the awakened ones, in that he told me to return, to warn, to scream if necessary. Before the world drowns in a light that seems divine, but is the ultimate trap. I looked around one last time. Here you are. The division had already begun. I blinked, and the scenery changed again. The false glow dissolved like smoke blown by the wind, and before me stood something I will never forget. It was like being on top of a mountain, looking out over the entire earth. But the earth didn't look like the maps showed it. It pulsed like a living heart. Every city, every village, every soul visible in the form of light. Some lights were shining brightly, others flickered, fragile, and others had already disappeared completely. And then I saw a line appeared in the middle of the earth, a line as thin as a strand of hair, but brighter than any star. She ran from one side to the other, dividing everything. And this line began to expand. And as it expanded, people were also divided. It was not an external division of religions, races, or countries. A division of the heart. I saw people running towards the light, even if they were tripping, even if they were injured. Their faces were determined, their eyes cried, but their feet never stopped. And I saw others stopped, looking at the shiny line with disdain, mocking, laughing. Some even tried to erase the line with words, with anger, with arguments. But the line, it didn't stop. It was alive. It was like God's own will moving forward. "It's starting," he said from behind me, his voice deep like restrained thunder. "This is the division of those who belong to me, and those who only used my name." My legs became weak. I saw entire churches splitting in half. I saw families divided in tears. I saw friendships falling apart like paper in a fire, not out of hate, but out of spiritual choice. "Make no mistake," he said. "This separation is not made by human hands. It is made by the Spirit." I wanted to scream. I wanted to warn everyone, take each person by the hand, and drag them to the side of the light. But he stopped me. Each soul will choose for itself. And I saw that it was true. I saw young people silently in their rooms deciding in tears. I saw old people regretting it in secret. I saw children, barely able to speak properly, running into the light with the purity that many adults had lost. I also saw crowds marching to the other side, without realizing that they were moving away from real life. And then, he showed me something even deeper. The line didn't just divide, she lit. Every time someone crossed over to the light side, their brightness increased and the darkness around shrank. It was like little explosions of freedom in the middle of war. "That's why you need to talk," he said. "Every soul that wakes weakens the darkness for thousands." And the tears flowed freely down my face. I was nothing, just a 13-year-old boy. And yet, there, I understood. My voice could set entire cities on fire. "Speak, Ethan," he repeated. "Speak before the line closes." Time was running out. I could feel it. The next scenario he would show me would be the point of no return. I knew that what came now would be different. Heavy. Final. The scenery around me began to shift, like glass cracking beneath my feet. The air grew thick, as if space itself was holding its breath. Suddenly, I saw the line of light that cut across the earth begin to fade, close. It wasn't fast, but it was definitive, as if invisible fingers were pulling at a curtain. And when it closed, there would be no turning back. Despair took over my chest. Not by me, I knew I had been called, but for the thousands, millions of souls who were still undecided, who still thought they had more time. "Wait," I shouted at him. "Please, some more." And then, something incredible happened. For a fraction of time that I don't know how to measure, he stopped the closing. Time suspended, sound silent, the entire earth on pause. And in the midst of this silence, I heard what he called the last cry. Sound that didn't come from just one place, but from everyone at the same time. It was a deep cry, tearing the fabric of reality. A collective scream of souls awakening at the last second. It was beautiful and devastating. I saw people falling to their knees in squares, in rooms, in hospital corridors. People dropping cell phones, dropping microphones, dropping masks. Running, stumbling, crying, screaming, to cross the line before it closed. I saw teenagers putting down headphones to listen to a voice they always knew existed but had ignored. I saw old people throwing away cold religions to cling to the living presence. I saw little children praying words they had never learned but which came straight from their souls. The whole sky seemed to bend down to hear them. The last cry of mercy. But I also saw others, people who listened, but laughed, that he felt, but stiffened, that he saw, but preferred the darkness. These were covered with a thick shadow, not sent by God, but chosen by themselves. And the line. The line flashed one last time, like the flash of a divine camera taking the last photo in history. Then, slowly, she closed herself. On one side, the lights brightened. New, regenerated people lit like torches in the middle of the night. On the other, just silence and shadows. I fell face down on the floor, sobbing. It was so final, so terrible, and so fair. It wasn't unfair. It was the consequence of every choice, of every yes or no hidden in the ordinary hours of life. He approached me, with sadness, but also with unshakable firmness, and said to me, "Now, go back." I knew my mission was set. Tell me what I saw. Yell if necessary, because many were still waking up, and every second more was a miracle of mercy. With a last look full of weight and love, he touched my heart, and everything disappeared in a flash. The flash enveloped me so quickly that, for a second, I thought I was going to fall apart, disappear forever, but no. When he touched my heart, something pulled my soul back like lightning being pulled across the sky. A feeling of falling and flying at the same time, a shock of heat and cold, and then, pain. I opened my eyes with a scream stuck in my throat. The world was too noisy. The colors are too strong. The pain of the body being too heavy. But what shocked me most was his absence. The absence of that perfect presence. It was like waking up from an eternal hug straight to freezing concrete. My mother cried over me. There were people around, hands touching me, sirens echoing, but none of that mattered at that moment. Because inside me, I still heard the voice. "Speak up, Ethan. Now is the time." I tried to get up, but my body was an anchor. So I simply whispered with what little strength I had, "He's coming. The gate is already closing." The words came out broken, but they carried more truth than anything I had ever said in my entire life. In the days that followed, I barely spoke. It was like my soul was still adjusting, like every part of me had been rebuilt. People said I was lucky, that it was a miracle, that it was an accident. But I knew. I knew what had really happened. I had been brought back as a living warning. Something changed in me forever. I could no longer look at the world in the same way. I saw cracks in the empty conversations. I heard the hunger in the fake smiles. I felt the invisible war vibrating in the air, even in the most normal places. Many nights I woke up crying without even knowing why. Not out of fear, but out of urgency. Missing what I saw. Heavy for what was yet to come. I started writing everything down. Every vision. Every word. Not for me, but for you. Because if you're listening to my story right now, it's no coincidence. You are part of the last cry. You are alive in this time at this very moment in history because there is a calling upon you too. A call to cross the line. To be real light, not false light. To wake up before the last crack closes forever. Don't ignore what's touching your heart right now. It's not emotion. It's not imagination. It's Him, calling, whispering. Before the whole world goes silent, I didn't come back just to tell a story. I came back to say, and now, and now, and now. And if you listen carefully, we'll listen too. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.